Welcome back to another episode of Lost in the Farmer's Market Garden Shorts, where we take wonderful forays into the garden world. Now, today we're filming from the lab because it's raining. Also, the specimen in the field of this same plant you see before you is not so picturesque. However, this plant is fabulous. Yeah, I said that. Now, what you have before you is one of the banes of the herbicide industry. Now, this is just a little diatribe, but it is related. You see, the herbicide industry works very hard to tell you that you need to have a perfect golf course-esque lawn. And they list all these plants like they're FBI's most wanted, and they tell you how terrible they are, and that they're going to ruin your life, and they're going to bring in communism, and they're going to subvert your kids and turn them into hippies, and all kinds of other madness that they say directly or indirectly. I mean, if you read some of the old books, the ortho books that have been published by that company, you would think having a dandelion in your lawn made you some kind of crazy radical. Ha! I laugh at that definition. But this plant here, alongside dandelions, is one of the the most difficult to eradicate, quote-unquote, weeds out there. We know for a fact that lawns don't do jack. Yes, they hold the soil in theory, but that's it. Plants like these really anchor the soil. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, come on, get on with it. Fine. This plant is commonly called yellow dock. It has a bunch of other common names, but we'll get to that in a minute. Now, the scientific name is Rumex crispus. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Rumex before. If not, I'll give you a little hint. Rumex is the same family that sorrel comes from. Sorrel is Rumex aceticella. Almost blew that one, huh? And also, there's bloody dock, which is a common ornamental perennial. It looks sort of like this plant, but with smaller leaves and blood-red veins. It's really dramatic. And that's Rumex sanguineum. See, I didn't screw that one up either. Now, dock and its whole family are sort of interesting because they have certain biology. They're edible, believe it or not. Yellow dock is edible in limited quantities. But what's interesting is that it is actually native to Europe and West Asia, but it's become naturalized all throughout the USA. Every state just about. And that's because it's a perennial in USDA zones 2 through 10. I mean, talk about distribution. It prefers a soil pH of 6 through 7 and exposure of full sun to partial shade, making it very adaptable, just like the dandelion. Now, it's interesting that it has two other nicknames, two other common names, and this is why we don't often lead with common names, because the scientific name positively IDs and common names can be confusing. It's also known as curled dock and curly dock. With names like that, I'm not surprised there aren't some Moe and Larry docks out there too. Just for the humor value. Agronomists do have a dark sense of humor after all. Now, the average height on this plant for the rosette, because you can see it's a rosette-forming plant. I mean, you can see the 3 growing points that are coming off this specimen. Singular root, mind you. The rosette, so to speak, is often anywhere from 12 inches to 18 inches in height, maximum height. The width or diameter, I should say, of that rosette is usually anywhere from 6 inches to 24 inches, so it's basically a 2 foot by 2 foot kind of plant, the central mass of leaves. However, the flower stalks that emerge can be up to 4.5 feet long. So that puts the flowers at torso or head height for an average American male. Not bad. The flowers themselves aren't too special. They're usually sort of a yellow-green color, and they come in big clusters. But what's interesting is that those flowers attract the American copper and the bronze copper butterfly, as well as a bunch of other pollinators. So this plant is a feeding plant for a bunch of insects that we actually need to help pollinate other stuff. If you draw them in for nectar for one plant, they're going to hit up other plants while they're there. This is consequently why you never set up a Japanese beetle pheromone trap in your yard. You give it to your neighbor. because there's no telling what the beetles will eat or do before they get to the trap. That said, on a medical angle, and this is, I have to throw out the usual disclaimer, if you intend to use any herbal substances for curing or treating ailments or diseases or whatnot, I recommend you consult a physician, someone who is truly qualified as an herbalist, or, multiple reputable sources. I don't want none of y'all tripping mad balls out in the woods because you ate too much Asiatic goat's beard or something. And yes, that's a dandelion relative. Anyway, medicinally, this plant is known to be a mild laxative. There is some suggestion that it's actually useful to treat liver ailments. Again, it's also known to have certain compounds that may be bad for you, and preparation may be very specific. When you're using a plant like this, dot your T's. Well, yeah, you could dot your T's. You want to be fancy. Dot your I's, cross your T's, double check your Q's. Don't mess around. Now, I'm not going to say this will kill you dead, because there's no evidence that anything in this plant consumed in a small or reasonable quantity will kill you. There are just notations that large amounts of leaves will give you severe digestive upset, which probably leads to the whole laxative thing. I mean, nothing says camping like crippling diarrhea. Oh yeah, miracle weight loss plan. Seriously, don't do that. Now, interestingly enough, I did find some nutritional value for the leaves in specific. Now, I believe it said, the sources that I've looked into said that this is per 100 grams of leaves. They did not specify if they were raw or cooked. So I would take this one with a bit of caution. Now, I do know that there is a major publication that talks about cooking and using this plant, and that's Elias and Dykman's Edible Wild Plants of North America. Go look that up on Amazon if you can. Totally worth it. No, they didn't pay me. I'm just putting a good book out there. Anyway, nutritional value for the leaves of this plant, per 100 grams, roughly speaking, 7.6 milligrams of calcium, 4.92 milligrams of iron, 34 milligrams of magnesium, 54 milligrams of phosphorus, 395 milligrams of potassium. Who the hell needs bananas? 37 milligrams of sodium, 0.43 milligrams of zinc, and it contains vitamin A, beta-carotene, and vitamin C. Now, what's interesting is that it contains 363 mcgs of beta-carotene. That's a lot of beta-carotene. I mean, really, that's carrot-esque. So, I mean, if you're in the wilderness and you need to eat something, this is the plant for you. Now, I should point out, again, this plant has been cultivated. I brought the root in, I gave it normal potting soil, and I've been fertilizing it. And so it's leafy and tender and looks nothing like a wild one. Well, okay, it looks like a wild one, but the leaves are pretty almost. And that's really the point. This plant has been maligned by the herbicide industry for a while now, but it, too, has the ability to be something really interesting to look at. So, consider carefully that the weed you are getting rid of, its potential has not been explored yet. And that's kind of the end of me getting on the soapbox for this episode. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, like, subscribe, hit up the blog, check us out, and as always, folks, keep them growing, save the weeds, destroy the lawns.